Okay, welcome everyone. We will start. This week is, besides Parshas Beshalach, it's also Shabbos Shira, Shabbos of singing. The Chidush Harim wants to understand, he asks, why is it that this Parsha is called Shabbos Shira? Why, when it comes to Parshas Yisro, which is next week's Parsha, we wouldn't call next week's Parsha Parshas Kabbalas HaTorah? The Torah was given in the Parshas Yisro, but we wouldn't call the Parsha Parshas Kabbalas HaTorah. Why is it, asks the Chidush Harim, when it comes to Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos is called Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of singing, because we sing the Az Yashir, the praise, the song that the Yidden sang when they went out of Mitzrayim. Why is it that it's called Shabbos Shira? The Chidush Harim says, and he explains it, he says, Parshas Vayechi, going back to Parshas Vayechi, we know that Parshas Vayechi is stuma, which means that the space between, I spoke about this in Parsha back then, the space between Parshas Vayigash and Parshas Vayechi, which usually between one Parsha and the other there is space without any writing in the Sefer Torah, but when it comes to Parshas Vayechi, it's connected. Vayechi is connected to Vayigash. Why? Famous Chazal, Rashi quotes it because the tzoris hashibud, the tzoris of Golus Mitzrayim, of the work in Mitzrayim, began to a certain extent in Parshas Vayechi, and it was very hard, difficult for the Bnei Yisrael. Nistabu eineim v'libam sheYisrael. It was a very difficult time for the Bnei Yisrael. So just like the hearts of the Bnei Yisrael were closed, so the two Parshias are closed. Says the Chidush Harim, there is a more deeper understanding in this idea when there is space, when there isn't space in the Torah. Sometimes we have space, sometimes there is a space without any writing, and sometimes there is no space. He says there is a deeper understanding in this concept. The neshama of a Yid, says in the Kabbalah Svarim, is connected to the writing of the Sefer Torah. All the letters, which is black, the letters that are written in the Sefer Torah, our neshama connects to the oisiyas HaTorah, to the words of the Torah. Our body connects to the space between one word and the other, to the klaf, the parchment. The empty parchment, when there is no writing, the part which is no writing, that part, we connect our body. The guf, the body connects to that part when there's no writing. Says the Chidush Harim, listening to this. We know in the Sefer Torah, if we look into the Sefer Torah, the words of Az Yashir, all the psukim of Az Yashir, Moshe Bnei Yisrael Az Yashir, the entire song of Az Yashir, there is actually more space than writing. Between one word and the other word of the words of the Shira of Az Yashir, there's actually double space, which is empty, than the actual writing. So in other words, there's a word, then there is space, then there is another word, Az, then there is this space for two words, and then it says Yashir. Then there is space for another two words without any writing, and then it says Hashira. So the words of the Shira of Az Yashir are very spread out. Says the Chidush Harim, you know why? Because the Shira, which we are basically singing in Parshas Beshalach, and we say it every single day in davening, the Shira has an amazing light. He says, when the words are very close to each other, then it's unfortunately the opposite of light. It's nistimu, it's a closed, there's a closeness. But when it comes to the Shira of Az Yashir Moshe, there's an openness. And the openness is without any words, and the openness is a connection that our body, our guf connects to this openness. And he says, people who could appreciate, who could feel the ruach, the energy, when we do the Az Yashir, there's an amazing light. There's amazing light when we do the Az Yashir. And where does this light come from? From the actual parchment, which there's no writing on it, which is the empty parchment, which, as I said before, in Az Yashir, there is double space without any writing between one word and another. That space has an amazing koyach of light. Says the Chiddushei Harim. That's the reason why it's called Shabbos Shira. It's a time when our body, obviously with our neshama together, sings and feels uplifted to Hashem and feels this closeness to Hashem. And this light shines in the Az Yashir, in the space between one word and another. Talmidim, Chasidim from the Chiddushei Harim say they would never see their Rebbe so excited and such a high like they saw him while the reading of Az Yashir was read in the Sefer Torah. The Chiddushei Harim would dance on his spot. He would be so, his face would be shining from Simcha, from Gishmak, because of the Shira, the light that he felt during the time of the reading of the Shira. Therefore, says the Chiddushei Harim, this Shabbos is Shabbos Shira. It's a time when our body sings and is excited and is uplifted towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We feel this light and this connection to Hashem. The Sadegera Rebbe, the Heilige Sadegera, he says, why is this week called Shabbos Shira? We don't find, says the Sadegera Rebbe, we don't find in any Parsha so many miracles, one after another, like in Parshas Beshalach. We see the miracle of the splitting of the Yam Suf, which is obviously beyond. We see the miracle, which says later on in the Parsha, where the water was very bitter. It says that the water was very bitter, and the Bnei Yisrael told Moshe Rabbeinu, how can we drink from this water? And Moshe Rabbeinu threw in a bitter stick into the water. And when he threw in this bitter stick, instead of making the water more bitter, the water became sweet, which is a total ness. A total ness. So we see another ness, another pella in this week's Parsha. Moving onward with the Parsha, we see the ness of the man falling every single day min Shemayim. Where in history did we find something like this? Only in the desert, only in the Midbar. And this is Parshas Beshalach mentioned in this week's Parsha. Again, a fascinating miracle. At the end of the Parsha, when Amalek comes and they start up with us, we win the battle. We win the war. That was a total nace, because Amalek was a very mighty, powerful nation. We won them. It's a pella, it's a nace. Says the Sadegera Rebbe, so many nisim mentioned in one parsha, one after another, which is pilaploim. It's beyond out of the norm. Yeah, we gotta sing. It's a Shabbos that we need to sing. We need to appreciate that Klal Yisrael, we as the nation of the Yidden, our nation is built with nisim, with ployim. That's how we're still around. We're still here after so many years of being chased from one place to another. We're still here. Why? We are a Peladiga nation. We're a nation that lives on ployim. And when we think into this idea, to this concept, Shira, we sing and we basically praise the Rebbeinu Shalom for all that he gives to us. Tzaddikim also called this parsha the Parsha of Emuna. In this week's Parsha, we see so many different ideas of Emuna, which is something that we all the time need to be mechazek ourselves. We have to strengthen ourselves when it comes to Emuna and believe in knowing that Hashem is the one who is in charge, and we don't understand everything, and we need to let ourselves being led by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Obviously, we got to do ishtadlus. We got to try our best. But at the end of the day, we always have to know and keep in mind that Hashem is in charge. Emuna one after another. Just to zoom in a little bit to appreciate one piece of this week's Parsha. We all know the Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim. For the first 3 days, they were on the route towards Eretz Yisrael. They're basically going in the direction of Eretz Yisrael. After 3 days, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, tell the Bnei Yisrael they should turn back to the direction that they left from, and they should come closer to the Yam Suf, and they basically should rest next to the Yam Suf. Moshe Rabbeinu gave over the message to the Bnei Yisrael. Says Rashi, the Bnei Yisrael did not ask why, when, what. They didn't ask any questions. They said, we're going to listen to Ben Amram, we're going to listen to Moshe Rabbeinu. If he says this is what Hashem wants us to do, we're going to basically follow his direction without any questions. So what were they doing? For the next 3 days, they basically turned back. And now they're resting next to the Yam Suf, right in front of the Avodah Zarah called Piachiros. This Avodah Zarah that was the only Avodah Zarah that was not destroyed during Makas Bechoros. Because during Makas Bechoros, all the idols of Mitzrayim were destroyed, and the Avodah Zarah called Pisoim, or Piachiros, this Avodah Zarah was not destroyed. And this is where the Bnei Yisrael were resting now. The Yam Suf in front of them, scorpions and wild beasts from both sides of them, and here they are resting. And they're doing this for 3 days. Now let me explain a little bit, Rabbi Isai. What is this? What are these 3 days? What is the importance of 3 days? We find very interestingly, before Hashem gave the Torah to the Bnei Yisrael, in Parshas Yisrael, next week's Parsha, we find something really an amazing thing. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the Bnei Yisrael they should rest around the mountain, and they should not touch the mountain for 3 days. Again, 3 days. They should rest around the mountain, and they shouldn't touch the mountain for 3 days. Why? So when it comes the time for Matan Torah, for Hashem giving the Torah, they should be in this mode. They should be used to not touching the mountain. So when Hashem comes onto Har Sinai, they wouldn't touch the mountain, because touching the mountain would chas v'sholom be death penalty. And this way they'll be used not touching the mountain. So we see this idea, 3 days changes the status, changes the way the person behaves. Hashem tells Moshe to tell the Bnei Yisrael to turn back, to go towards Mitzrayim and stop in front of the Yam Suf, and they should be there for 3 days. What happened during this 3 days? What took place during this 3 days? These 3 days were days for the Yidden to chazer, to go over again and again. We rely only on Hashem. Emuna, and Emuna, and again Emuna, and again Emuna. Believe in Hashem. Chazering, Emuna. Believe in Hashem, only Hashem. I rely only on Hashem. For 3 days, they were there. Now, Rabbi Isai, listen into this fascinating medrash. We all know Paroi came on the 7th day, and the Bnei Yisrael saw Paroi from behind, and the Yam Suf was in front, scorpions and wild beasts from both sides. They felt trapped. They basically felt they have no way out. During that time, says the Medrash, the Bnei Yisrael were challenged on the highest level. How and what would be their reaction? What would be the reaction of Klal Yisrael during these moments when they feel everything is lost? And like I said, 3 days, they chazered Emuna and Emuna and Emuna again and again and again. But when it comes to the peak, it comes to the challenge, to the nisoyin, that's when the struggle begins. Now, when Bnei Yisrael saw themselves in such a desperate moment, they started screaming to the Rabbi Shalom. Moshe Rabbeinu was screaming to Hashem. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not a time to scream. It's a time to do action. It's a time for the Bnei Yisrael to start moving closer to the Yam Suf. Now, let me share with you, before moving forward with this concept of Emuna and Emuna and Emuna, let me share with you a Zoya. The Zoya says, Klipas Mitzrayim, the Tumah of Mitzrayim, which I spoke about this a few times already, was a beyond, very, very significant Tumah. The Mitzvah Shetuma was very, very significant, very serious. Now the moment has come, says the Zohar, for this klipa, for this tumah to be broken, to be shattered. And how would this happen? When would this happen? It would only happen when the Bnei Yisrael will reach a level of Emuna to the highest of the highest level. When they'll reach this highest of the highest level of Emuna, believe in Hashem, even when they see everything going against them, the moment will come that Klipas Mitzrayim, the Tumah of Mitzrayim, will be shattered, and the Bnei Yisrael will be able to creep out of the Memtes Shari Tumah and start climbing up the ladder towards Kedusha, and 49 days later to be able to be Mikabel the Torah. Actually, not 49, because you have to take off 7 for Shvi Shal Pesach, so it was not 49. It was obviously 42. So in order to creep out of this tumah, of this klip of Mitzrayim, they had to reach the peak of Emuna in the darkest and the most like closed moments possible. Now the Bnei Yisrael, this is when the peak, when the moment took place. Now the Bnei Yisrael are going against nature. They're going towards the water even though they don't understand, because the Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hashem said, start traveling, go to the Yam Suf. We all know, Nachshon ben Aminadav jumps into the Yam Suf, and the water of the Yam Suf comes very high up, and he felt like he was about to drown. When he started begging, Rabbi Shalom, help me, save me. The water is basically almost above my mouth and my nose. Save me. There is a medrash that the Kedushas Levi brings. Not only Nachshon jumped into the water. After Nachshon, hundreds and thousands of Yidden jumped into the water before it was split, following Nachshon ben Aminadav. So there were hundreds and thousands, maybe thousands, let's say how much. But there were a lot of Yidden that followed Nachshon, and they also jumped into the water. Basically, overcoming this amazing moment of having this amazing belief in Hashem without any cheshbonis, without any calculation if it makes sense or not. Says the Kedushas Levi, if you take the word Yashir, Yashir basically means we're going to sing. It's a lashon asid. We're going to sing, not shar. We sang. We're going to sing, which is a lashon, basic expression of something that's going to happen. Why? Says the Kedushas Levi. You know what happened? When the Bnei Yisrael entered the water before it was split, not only that they jumped into the water, they actually started singing they started singing to Hashem before the water split. Which is basically an amazing, incredible madrega and Emuna. They were able to sing, to thank Hashem even before the splitting of the sea, for the future when it's going to be split. That's the level of Emuna that the Bnei Yisrael had when they went into the Yam Suf. That they were singing even before the moment when the water split. They were singing already to Hashem. The Belzerov explains, which is something that I shared already a few times, but it's mamish. It has to do with mamish what we're saying. The Belzerov explains, why is it says Rabbi Yisachadava Belz, that the ladies, the Noshim Tzidkoniyos, were able to overcome later on, when the Bnei Yisrael were challenged with the Chet HaEgel, with the sin of the Egel. The ladies, the Noshim Tzidkoniyos, were able to overcome the challenge, and they did not fall for this Egel Hazah, for the golden calf, which unfortunately the men, besides Shevet Levi, unfortunately fell for this challenge for the Egel Hazah. Says the Belzerov, you know why? These Noshim Tzidkoniyos, in Mitzrayim, they prepared instruments because they were so clear that the moment will come that the Yidden will be taken out of Mitzrayim. They had such a clear belief and Emuna in what Hashem said, that Pokoi Pikadeti Eschem, I will take you out of Mitzrayim. The belief was such a clear belief that they actually put together instruments for the moment when they'll be taken out of Mitzrayim, to be able to play with these instruments to thank Hashem. And yes, when the moment came and the Yam Suf was split and Moshe Rabbeinu was singing with the Bnei Yisrael, with the Anoshim, with the men, we all know what did Miriam do in the same moment, the same time? She took the ladies to a different spot, to a different place, and she was singing with them, and they were playing with instruments. They were the betufim ubimcholos. They had these instruments that added to their simcha. Says the Belzerov, the level of simcha that the Noshim Tzidkoniyos had while they were doing Shira, they were saying the Shira, was on a higher level than the simcha that the Bnei Yisrael, that the men had when they were singing the Shira. The Bnei Yisrael had a bigger simcha, a higher level of simcha than the Bnei Yisrael. Says the Belzerov, with such a madrega of Emuna and Simcha, you don't get influenced by Egel Hazov. So when the Egel Hazov challenge came along, they were able to overcome this challenge. Why? Their Simcha, the Simcha of the Noshim Tzidkoniyos, was on a higher dark, on a higher level than the Simcha of the Bnei Yisrael. So again, koyach of Emuna, the koyach of belief, which is basically the yisoid, the fundament, the yisoid of this week's Parsha, of belief, knowing and believing in the Rebbeinu Shalom, knowing that Hashem is koil yochal, He can do everything. And when a person believes 100% that Rebbeinu Shalom is koil yochal, the person is excited, is besimcha, the person is calm. Unfortunately, when we fall into the trap of losing that focus, losing the focus of knowing and believing 100% that the Rebbeinu Shalom is in charge, and when we think we take charge, that we are in charge, chas v'shalom, that's when the lack of Emuna comes in. That's when the lack of Emuna comes into our way of thinking, and that's nebuch, when we start losing and we start becoming, we chas v'shalom, we become nervous, and we have anxiety, we have different things when we're lacking the Emuna. But the Bnei Yisrael had this huge Emuna. Hashem says, Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'yisrael, go and start going into the Yam. They just followed and they did what they needed to do. And the Noshim Tzidkoniyos, the ladies, had it on even a higher level, and therefore they were not influenced by the Egel Hazov. We see Rashi says, why, before I said one pshat, why does it say Yashir, that they will sing? Why not Shor, that they sang? I told you, I shared with you a pshat from the Kedushas Levi, which I said before that even before the water was split, they sang already, because they had this such a belief that it's going to split, that they sang before that. And actually this was, says the Kedushas Levi, one of the reasonings why there was Zoicha to the Krias Yam Suf, because when a person is so strong with his belief that something is going to happen, if something good is going to happen, if a person believes that something good will come into the universe, it taka happens. And because of them having this strong belief that the Yam Suf will split, and they sang even before that, they were Zoicha that the Yam Suf actually split. But there's another pshat in Rashi. Rashi says, you know why it says Yashir? Because Yashir is hinting Tchias HaMeisim for the time of Mashiach. There'll be a time when Mashiach comes and Hashem b'mheira b'yameinu, when all the dead, when all the people will stand up Tchias HaMeisim and will sing again to Hashem the song. There'll be a song that will sing then to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Az Yashir, then we'll sing, Moshe will also sing with us a song when Mashiach comes. But there is a Chassidish word, a Chassidish taich on this from the Vishnitzer Rebbe. He says like this: why is it that so many times we feel down? There are times that we're not chas v'sholem, we're not motivated to get out of bed chas v'sholem. We're not motivated to daven, to learn, to do our normal things that we need to do. We're chas v'sholem, we're very down chas v'sholem. Sometimes we feel very down. It all comes from the same problem. From the problem of Emuna. The problem which is basically losing the focus. Getting basically sidetracked into a world of so much distraction going on, and losing track that Hashem is the one in charge. Even though it seems like all different things are causing certain things to happen, we know that it's Hashem. When we lose this track, this focus, that's when chas v'sholom, sometimes we feel down, and we don't have the cheshik, we don't have the gishmak, we don't feel up to doing stuff because we feel down. Says the Vishnitzer Rebbe, Tchias HaMeisim is not only when the dead will become alive in the time of Mashiach. It's now. There are times that we feel dead. There are times we feel low. We feel like we want to stay in bed, chas v'sholom, a whole day. We don't feel motivated. We don't feel chiyus, a geshmak. We don't feel a geshmak in ruchnius, in spirituality, in serving Hashem. We don't feel a geshmak in our day-to-day just life. We don't feel a geshmak. When we have Emuna, we have this Emuna, we believe in Hashem. Tchias HaMeisim. With Emuna, we start becoming alive. We start living. We become freilach, happy, besimcha. The Nashim Tzidkaniyos dance with their instruments because we're besimcha. And that's when we creep out from chas v'sholem moments which we feel very low. The Parsha of the Mon, which is obviously an amazing, fascinating Parsha, has a lot to do with Shabbos Kodesh. Here we are, Thursday night, Leil Shishi, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Beshalach. The Torah tells us, Erev Shabbos, 2 portions of Mon fell. Now, it's not that 2 portions of Mon fell. I need to correct myself. According to the Medrash, and Rashi brings this Medrash, it was actually 1 portion that fell. But when they brought it home, so in other words, when they picked up Erev Shabbos, their portion, if they had, let's say, 10 whatever, they had a family of 2, of 3, of 4, whatever the amount was. When they picked up the portions, they picked up the oimer that they were supposed to get, they only picked up for one day, for Friday, for Erev Shabbos. In fact, the first Erev Shabbos, they didn't even know that there'll be Lechem Mishnah. Moshe Rabbeinu did not tell them beforehand. And suddenly when they came home, they saw that a nace happened. They have two portions. They have a double portion. They are all confused. And it says in the Torah that the Yidden came to Moshe and they said, Moshe, what's going on? Why is it that we have 2 portions today, Friday? And Moshe Rabbeinu said, you know why? Because Hashem said there won't be any man on Shabbos. And today, the man will fall twice, double every Erev Shabbos Kodesh. Now let me tell you an amazing Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Let me share with you an amazing Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Why is it, says the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, that Moshe did not tell the Bnei Yisrael beforehand that Erev Shabbos there'll be double portion? He didn't tell them. It was only after they came home, like I just said, that's when they saw they had a double portion. Why didn't he tell them beforehand? Listen to this Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Says the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, a person becomes way more emotional or things become more like wow when you see a thing in action. If when you hear something, it doesn't have an effect the way it has an effect when you're doing it. In other words, action, when a person does something and he sees something fascinating, when his body is involved in that action, in that thing, he's way more nispal, it's way more wow than something which is just passive. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted that the Bnei Yisrael should, by themselves, they shouldn't know beforehand. They should on their own see this amazing nace, that there was 2 instead of 1, and it would make a way deeper impression on them what Shabbos Kodesh is all about. The koyach of Shabbos Kodesh will make a way deeper impression on them without them knowing before and them finding out after the fact that they have the double portion. It would be a way more effect to appreciate what Shabbos is all about. On Shabbos Kodesh, there is no man. The Zohar HaKadosh, which is the famous Zohar, says, you know why there is no man on Shabbos? Because Shabbos is the Mekoyer HaBrocha. Shabbos is the source for the bracha of the entire week. Kol berchoin de le'elo v'sata, says the Zohar HaKadosh. All the brachas from above and underneath, from beneath, everything, biyoyma shvion talyon, everything is dependent on Shabbos Kodesh. Shabbos is the Mekoyer, the source of all the bracha. When it comes Shabbos, there is no man. But the Mekor, the source of all the man that's going to fall on in the entire week, is already ready to come down during the week. So when we are involved in Shabbos, we're excited with Shabbos. We're excited with the Sudas of Shabbos. We're excited with davening on Shabbos. We're just spending time with each other on Shabbos. We're in an exciting mode. We bring bracha. And we don't only bring bracha for Shabbos, we bring bracha for the entire week. Shabbos Kodesh is the Mekoyer HaBracha, and this is the source for bracha for the whole week. And therefore, Shabbos Kodesh, we all sing this very famous song from Rabbi Bayer Godel of Karlin, Ko Echsoif Noyam Shabbos, HaShabbos Noyam Aneshomois. Shabbos is a time that we connect, and Shabbos is a time where the bracha, the source of bracha, is brought into the universe for the entire week. One last very interesting thought to share with the Olam before the Shiur is over. We find this week twice a very incredible idea. Once by the splitting of the Yam Suf, and the other one, which is the story that took place at the end of the Parsha, where Hashem tells Moshe, when the Yidden didn't have water, to hit the rock, and the rock will release water, the water will come out, and Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock, and the water came out. The same thing actually happened many, many years later. At the end of the 40 years, when Miriam, the Be'er Miriam disappeared, Hashem, the Bnei Yisrael had no water. Hashem tells Moshe, I want you to speak to the rock. Instead of speaking, he hit the rock. And Hashem was very upset. And this is one of the reasons why Moshe wasn't Zoicha to get into Eretz Yisrael. Wait a second. Why in this week's Parsha, the same story, Moshe Rabbeinu was actually commanded, Hashem told him to hit the rock. And he did it. And Hashem was totally fine. Later, Hashem said, speak to the rock. Now another thing that we find this week, also very similar, we find, not similar, but also this, you'll see both ideas go together, and I'll explain it in 1 minute. We find that when Moshe Rabbeinu put his hand on the Yam Suf, before the Yam Suf was split, it says the Malach, the Sar Shel Yam, the Sar of the Yam Suf, was arguing with Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Sar of the Yam Suf said, why should I listen to you? You tell me I should split. You were created on the 6th day. Moshe, you're a man. Mankind was created on the 6th day. I was created, says the Sar Shel Yam, on the 3rd day. So why should I listen to you? You were created on the 6th day. Says the Medrash, Hashem took Moshe's hand, and together, Kaviochel, with the hand of Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu split the Yam Suf. Says the Chaim HaKodesh, wait a second. Years later, Reb Pinchas ben Yair, when he needed to cross the Genoi river, he told the river to split, and it listened to him. Over there, it doesn't say that the water was negotiating with him. Why not? So listen to this. Both the hitting of the rock and the hitting of the sea are answered with one answer. Says the Chaim HaKodesh, over here, it was before Kabbalah HaTorah, before receiving the Torah. The other happenings were after the Torah was given. A Yid who speaks Torah, a Yid who his mouth talks Torah, his mouth becomes a very powerful mouth. If we keep our mouth b'kedusha, we don't say chas v'shalom things that are not appropriate. We keep our mouth b'kedusha in a kedushadik way. Our mouth is very powerful. Moshe Rabbeinu in this week's parsha, by the splitting of the sea, was before Matan Torah. So the Sarah Shel Yam said, you were created the 6th day, and I was created the 3rd day. Why should I listen to you? But Pinchas ben Yair, which was already after Kabbalah HaTorah, he has the koyach of Torah, and the Torah was created before the world was created. Oh, the water does not argue, the Sarah Shel Yam does not argue with him. Same with the water with the rock. In this week's Parsha, which is still before Kabbalah HaTorah, Moshe can't speak to the rock, because Moshe, even though Moshe was the Heilige Moshe, but he doesn't have yet the Koyach HaTorah, he needs to zetz the rock. Over there later, after Kabbalah HaTorah and Parshas Chukas, Moshe's mouth has Koyach, with the Koyach HaTorah, with that Koyach, speaking even to a rock, could give out water. So what do we see from this? We see an incredible zach. We Yidden, we have such a koyach, such a strength that no other nation has, which is the koyach HaTorah. We should all be zoicha this Shabbos Shira, to feel this Shira, to feel this connection, this Simcha, like the Chedusha Rim felt, and appreciate the awe, the light that comes together, comes with singing the Shira. We should be besimcha. We should appreciate, like Miriam Anavia, she came out with the ladies, with the Noshim Tzidkaniya, singing, not influenced by other influences, not influenced by the Chekter Egel. And we should have this Koyach HaSimcha that should keep us going, Tchias HaMesim, and we should be Zoicha with it, singing this Shira. It should bring down way, way more Shira. Like the Kedushas Levi said, we should be Zoicha, that we should be safe. In all the corners of the Welt, all the Yidden should be safe. There should be no chas v'sholem, harm done to any Yid, and we should be zoicha that it should be a safe world. All the nations should recognize, Umala, Oretz, Deya, recognize that Hashem is the only one in charge, and we should be zoicha to this big simcha of the Simcha Shel Bias HaMashiach Tzedkei Rabbi Bayer.